There are many films that I've watched in my life. Some very recent like The Batman or Top Gun Maverick, or some really old ones like 2001: A Space Odyssey or Apocalypse Now. All of those films are ones that I constantly talk about because of how good they are and how I love its soundtrack. If you asked me years ago how much I cared for music in any show or movie, I would have told you that if it sounded good, then why does it matter? It's all thanks to series like Gundam and helping me appreciate music more and more, specifically a soundtrack or musical score. Not only is something that appeals to my ears, but something that can be utilized to tell a story. And today, I'm going to take a look at a few pieces of music from various Gundam shows and movies in order to show the beauty of Gundam's music, starting with Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt. Gundam's music has been very different over the years and has evolved and changed many times, and has had many iconic and well-known composers from all over the anime industry that many people watching right now might be familiar with, like Hiroyuki Sawano, Yoko Kanno, and Kohei Tanaka. And in this video, I'm not just going to be talking about why their music sounds so great, but a bit more to that. And I'm going to do a somewhat deep dive into reasons why you, the viewer, may have liked or disliked a piece of music that I'll list. But more on that soon. We've got a lot of music to go through today, but starting off, let's talk about Gundam Thunderbolt. Gundam Thunderbolt is a series that many people remember as one of the best. It had some incredible action, amazing animation, along with some really nice characters. Those parts aren't mainly why I like this series as much as others do, but one of the reasons why I hold Thunderbolt, mainly December Sky, in such a high regard isn't just because of its amazing animation and action, which is something I will never ever complain about in a Gundam series, but it's because of how it utilizes the soundtrack to the narrative's overall benefit. Gundam Thunderbolt's score was done by one of the members of the Seatbelts, who are most famously known for the opening of Cowboy Bebop. That person was Naruyoshi Kikuchi, and this soundtrack was different from your average soundtrack. Gundam's soundtrack throughout the years consists of very similar themes, some for its main Gundams or mobile suits, some for the main characters, you know what I mean. Well, for Thunderbolt, it's a bit different. Kikuchi, instead of following the formula, decided to go against the grain and make the soundtrack instead music that the series' characters would actually listen to, like songs that they'd actually have on their playlist. That's why the music sounds so different from time to time, from hard and chaotic jazz to very quiet soul music. To me, it adds a lot more depth to the world, but mostly to its characters, since the series is a lot more grounded and leaning towards the more chaotic and hellish world that the characters live in, and these pieces of music add so much more to the personalities of different characters, and because of that, it makes many scenes hit so much harder than it used to be. For those who aren't familiar with the series, Gundam Thunderbolt takes place during the One-Year War, where the More Brotherhood, a Federation faction, and the Living Dead division, that's a Zeon organization, are both at war at each other for some time now, and in each side, their strongest mobile suit pilots eventually get into conflict with each other, mainly because of their different music tastes. Coming up first, there's E.O. Fleming. E.O. has taste of a more aggressive type of jazz, and honestly, I'm pretty sure that's his personality trait. And his jazz is something that sounds so wild and crazy, and throughout the series he always has his jazz playing when he goes out to fight. And it's in the battlefield in which he finds that chaotic environment is one he could truly be free in. Almost like he was practically built to fight, just like his Gundam. And he proves this in every scene he's in. Before I go on, I want to discuss a little bit about different types of musical techniques and what type of music this soundtrack really is. Some might say, Cheems, it's jazz. Well, there are many types of jazz in this type of soundtrack, but that's not what I mean when I'm talking about what type of music the soundtrack is. And what I really mean is if it's either diegetic or non-diegetic. If I already lost you, don't worry. If a piece of music is diegetic, it means that a piece of music isn't just present and heard by us the viewer, but is also heard by the characters or people in the film or TV show. There are many examples of diegetic music in anime, but one of my favorite examples of diegetic music in films is none other than...
Put on War Off, sing it loud. Into the Romeo Foxtrot, shall we dance?
The iconic Ride of the Valkyries scene from Apocalypse Now is an incredible example of diegetic music. It's played from speakers of Colonel Kilgore's helicopters. Not only can we, the viewer, hear the music, but so can the ones on board, as well as the ones who have to hear the music in terror as they get invaded. Like the Ride of the Valkyries, most of the music in Gundam Thunderbolt is diegetic, and like the Ride of the Valkyries, Io's music is also used as a method of psychological warfare. As he says when he first meets Daryl,
"ジャズが聞こえたら、俺が来た合図だ."
In an interview with the author and artist of Gundam Thunderbolt's manga, Yasuo Odagaki talked about the numerous ways music was used in history and how it was implemented in his own manga, and why he believes it's so important for him and for the story he wants to make. He said, for example, in Vietnam they listened to rock music. During World War II they made songs and records to pump up the American troops. In Japan during the Pacific War, all the young people sang military songs. The songs are used to take away the fear and pump up the troops. It was a very important element during war. I always thought it was strange not to include music, so it was a natural progression to have this idea in manga. In a regular manga, scenery can be used to express a character's emotion. But since Thunderbolt's fight scenes don't have this option, I explored how to express a character's emotion and inner thoughts in other ways. I thought about using oldies song lyrics to express the character's emotion. Jazz conveys Io's enjoyment during a fight scene, which is very scary and stressful. Jazz also conveys a sense of fun, which would be perfect for Io's character. I don't use jazz because I'm a fan. Jazz is too difficult for me to understand. Long story short, he uses music in order to convey the different personalities and backstories behind some of the characters in Thunderbolt, and in one scene in the anime makes perfect use of a technique that is known as a leitmotif. A leitmotif is defined as a recurrent theme throughout a musical or literary composition, associated with a particular person, idea, or situation. Some examples in Gundam can be the Shining Gundam's theme, which I will definitely talk about more in a bit, or in very popular movies can be the Imperial March from Star Wars or the Avengers theme. In Thunderbolt, there are many uses of leitmotifs, and for Daryl Lorenz, I want to mainly talk about a leitmotif that revolves around him. From a first glance when watching Thunderbolt, you can tell that Daryl and his team are all missing limbs and have prosthetic replacements and are part of a more beat up organization that's just barely scrapping by. With that little context of what this organization is, there's this one scene where Daryl is testing out the reused Psycho device, a device that'll help him turn the table against the Federation. And I think this scene might just be one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise. It has the best use of music and visual storytelling that I've ever seen in anime. Nothing comes close to this scene. Exposition is a very tricky thing to do naturally, and in films and anime it can be done perfectly or very haphazardly. In the scene, however, we get to see how Daryl ended up to where he is currently, with not a single word of dialogue, just music. And the track that plays over is the fantastic song titled The Dreaming Girl in Me. In this scene, we get to see a child grow and experience the horrors of war, basically losing his innocence and being broken down due to the horrors of war. But no matter what, there's still this enthusiastic child within him. Despite being beaten and crippled, he still tries to get back up to run again. In this scene, and even afterwards, this song helps characterize him as a very hopeful and optimistic soldier. And another way to use this song as a leitmotif is near the end, before the Living Dead division leads their final assault. The tone for the opening part seems very grim, since the Living Dead division basically wants to lead a suicide charge. So naturally most of the soldiers seem to have no hope, but their ace on the other hand still has some left. And as this song plays once more, Daryl gives Carla, his love interest, words of optimism, but most importantly, hope. This leitmotif is what represents hope for the future. As Daryl has been in places where there seems to be no hope, he still finds a way to stand up and run into hopeless situations with a positive outlook in order to ensure a better future for his comrades, but most importantly, inspire hope when there's little to none. There's a lot more examples of leitmotifs in Gundam, which is mainly one of the easiest musical techniques that can be pulled off. It can be used to represent pretty much anything in a movie or TV series, and when used effectively, it can have the audience feeling many ways. But another example I want to talk about was how it's used to make the audience feel hyped as hell. I haven't watched G Gundam in years, So I, along with a few other friends I know, each week spend time watching 2 episodes of G Gundam. And we have all noticed the main leitmotif that has been playing almost every single episode. It's none other than the Shining Gundam's theme. It's a leitmotif that people think represents the Shining Gundam, but it isn't just that. It more or less is a leitmotif that represents the pilot's emotion. In the series, Domon Kashu is the pilot of the Shining Gundam, and for reasons that I can't get into because of spoilers, he feels so many emotions that fuel the Shining Gundam. One quote from him that's kind of a meme is, "Take this, my love, my hatred, and all of my sorrow." And that's what this theme represents. If you hear the theme, it sounds angry, but it also sounds sad and at the same time determined. It's like the culmination of every single emotion Domon is feeling. And it's so satisfying when he gets that win every single time. Now there's a final technique, but it isn't really a big one like the leitmotif, but more or less is contrast. It's probably the easiest to understand. It's more or less a difference of how a piece of music is used, or a difference between certain parts of instruments. There's a lot more detailed stuff, but back when I first started the channel with my Universal Century review,
when I was fucking stupid,
I said that War in the Pocket's music was bad, and it didn't fit with what was being presented. Thankfully, almost 2 years, I can gladly say I was smoking crack when I made that video, because I can easily disagree with what I said back then. See, the show is focused around a child's point of view of a war going on, not a teenager like the original or Zeta Gundam. The main character for this one is like 8 years old, which is very different from your average Gundam show. And the series makes it very, very clear that the main character, Al, is naive. He doesn't understand anything about the war, and most importantly, he's just a kid. So to make the viewers understand this a lot more, the soundtrack, instead of sounding like your average Gundam show, has music sounding a lot more like this. Now I'm not going to give major spoilers for this series, so you gotta watch it for yourself if you haven't, but I did give spoiler warnings, so throughout the series, this kid grows as he experiences the realities of war. And I think it all crescendos at the end scene, where he fully realizes that the thing he hasn't been taking seriously is truly a frightening thing. And just like the scene where we first see him being a kid, enjoying life, we hear the same track at the end. Instead, due to the contrast, it makes the viewer realize that because of what has happened in the series, this kid is no longer the same. He's no longer the same innocent, young, and naive child he was before. He's more or less changed because of it, and now he'll never be the same. And in my old video, I said that's because the music didn't fit. But honestly, it's in this situation that the music works because it doesn't fit with what surrounds Al's day-to-day life. I think at the end, it represents everything I've mentioned in this video. So let's see if I can put it to words. Relatively early on in the series, we get to see Al basically be a kid, enjoy life, hate school, playing video games, pretty much doing things a kid would do. And there's a leitmotif for that. It represents that aspect of Al's character. It's more or less being used to represent the childish aspect of his character. But most importantly, his innocence. Being a kid means that you're not as mature as an adult is, obviously. And throughout the series, time and time again, this leitmotif repeats itself over and over, where Al shows this side of himself. And in the end of the series, it crescendos in the very last scene, where Al finally realizes that because of the decisions that he's made, and at a really young age, unfortunately, he'll be scarred forever because of this horrific event that he has experienced. And the leitmotif that is used to represent his innocence and his lack of maturity is played once more, but it's used to contrast Al from the beginning of the series to him at the end, if that makes any sense. But it's crazy that I never noticed this until I started writing this video. So now you understand contrast, you can go to my old War in the Pocket video and call me stupid. Almost every single series has a theme for its Gundam. The ARC-78, Zeta, Double Zeta, New Gundam, Unicorn, I can easily go on. Each has its own leitmotif. Some to sound cool like the Double Zeta and the Shining Gundam, or some can even have a deeper meaning for it. If you haven't seen my latest video about the new Doan's Island movie, then click on the timestamp before you get spoiled about this. If you've seen my review, you could probably remember how I talked about this one scene near the end of the film that hit me hard like a truck. There's many reasons why it felt so emotional. Maybe because it's the last time I'll ever experience something new with the White Base crew ever again, or maybe it was because of the music. It was definitely both, but the music 100% made me have such a much more emotional response. The song they used in that scene had to sound familiar to people who watched this film, and that's because it was a rendition of the original Mobile Suit Gundam theme song called Tobey Gundam. Tobei Gundam wasn't just the opening theme song, it was also used to represent the Gundam, and overall some scenes with the White Base crew and the original score created by Takeo Watanabe and Yuji Matsuyama. The melody and lyrics are nice and catchy, and the theme song is what people saw right before their episode started. Pretty common for most anime, obviously, but it's due to this very fact that this hit so hard for me. Tobei Gundam being the very first thing I heard before being immersed into the world of Gundam, with its characters that I got to meet and spend 43 episodes with, is the one theme that gets played right before we have to say goodbye to them all once more. One last time. And I knew that watching that scene, and I'm proud to admit that I teared up a lot when I was watching these last few minutes of that movie, and it's all thanks to contrast. The contrast threw me off guard, and it worked extremely well. I know I didn't go too incredibly in depth with this video, probably because I'm not too knowledgeable about music theory and all those different techniques. Some of it was a bit of a stretch, like the Dones Island one, but this idea was thanks to a YouTuber called Totally Not Mark. He made a video about Dragon Ball's music, and you should totally check him out. I'm glad I got to express the many ways Gundam has impacted my appreciation for music, and how many series and films utilize its music so well in order to tell a heart-wrenching yet beautiful story without any dialogue, in order to hype up the audience when they hear a recurring cue, and in order to get fans to emotionally resonate with the characters they've grown to love over time. Thank you all so much for watching this video. This one took me a lot more time to make, and I'm glad I got the chance to do it. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.